On Press Perspective today, we touch upon a number of stories, including South Korea's hosting of this year's Apec summit in the city of Gyeongju in the autumn. Do stay with us. Hello and welcome to Friday's edition of Press Perspective. It's June 20th here in Seoul. I'm Sunhee. Now, this year's Apec summit will take place here in South Korea, which will be hosting this forum for the second time, following the first one 20 years ago. Now, today we touch upon this upcoming event and other social stories and recent headlines. For more on this, I have freelance reporter David Lee here in the studio. David, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Good to see you again.
I also have writer Colin Marshall with the pundit's take on today's topics. Colin, welcome back.
Thanks, glad to be here.
Right, now before we start talking about Apec, let's begin by touching upon, generally speaking that is, summits held by countries. Now quite recently, that was this week, we had Canada hosting the G7 summit, and quite a bit of our panel discussions this week was about the agenda of the G7 summit in Canada. That being said, Colin, what are your thoughts with regard to the significance of such summits, multilateral summits, for the host country?
Yes, G7 is, as the name suggests, a group of 7 countries. The 7, as I believe they put it, largest advanced economies in the world. Advanced is a word sort of to keep China out of it, but the group includes the US, the UK, Canada, France, Italy, Germany, and Japan. I think that got me to 7. And they have a summit each year. And it's a rotating presidency, and so each country takes it every 7 years. In 2018, it was Canada, and sure enough, it was Canada again here in 2025. Now, in this case, it's not like the Olympics where you have to put in to host the summit. It's not like Eurovision where you have to win the contest and then the next year you host the party. It's simply, it goes with the presidency. So if your country has the presidency that year, if it's come around, then you host the summit. So it's not so much an honor as just part of the duty, you might say. And the G7 is not the only such group. There is the G20, which is also well known, which includes the G7, and then the 13 next largest economies, which of course includes South Korea. And there have been proposals now and again to widen membership in the G7. It was the G8 for a while with Russia, and there's been proposals for G9 or G10 or the 10 techno-democracies, which would include South Korea as well. You don't have to expand it far before you would be including South Korea. So potentially, if one of these other G groups were to form, then the presidency would come around to South Korea as a sort of regular matter of course. But then it is also, it's a gathering of heads of state of the largest economies in the world. So it is a good opportunity to show off how well-oiled a machine your country is, or may not be. Sometimes there have been problems, but usually these go off pretty well.
Right, indeed. David, with regard to South Korea then, as I mentioned earlier in the clip, South Korea is poised to host the Apec summit this year in the city of Gyeongju. This is our second hosting, our first one, and I remember still covering that back in the year 2005 in the port city of Busan. Can't believe it's already 20 years since then. What have been the prospects shared by the foreign media with regard to the planned Apec summit for this year in the city of Gyeongju?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, the theme of this year's summit will be building a sustainable tomorrow. And I think the distant circumstances that the international community is facing today will shape the conversations had by the leaders who will attend the summit in November. And I think, first of all, there are uncertainties in the international community, especially with the Russia-Ukraine war, the situation in the US where President Trump has kind of declared trade wars with countries, and the recent conflicts in the Middle East, and especially for Asian countries like South Korea, the uncertainties surrounding China with its borders. So I think more than ever, it will be important to build a stronger supply chain resiliency as our economies today that depend on international trade and exports more than ever. Secondly, I wanted to point out that the international community, especially these more stronger, bigger economies, they have a stronger, heavier reliance on technology such as AI these days. So it's it's kind of foreshadowed that a lot of these leaders will talk about fostering robust digital trade guidelines and agreements. And this is important because today data is stored abroad. So factors such as cybersecurity and digital ID systems, they require strong international ties and cooperation. And lastly, I wanted to point out how some of these demographic, social issues that the Asia-Pacific region is facing today, such as low birth rates, low marriage rates. Obviously, South Korea has the lowest birth rate today, but other countries, other members like Japan, Singapore, and Taiwan, they also are facing similar issues, problems today. So, yeah, some of the leaders, they might want to talk about having more labor mobility between the countries. Previously in this segment, we talked about how South Korea recently had reached a foreign population over 5%. So, yeah, some of these issues, I think, some of these circumstances, I think, will, yeah, shape how the leaders will interact with each other.
Right. David, this latest APEC here in South Korea, it comes after quite a number of domestic events here in the country. That being said, what do you suppose are the broader implications of hosting this multilateral summit, multinational summit for South Korea?
Yeah. Since December 3rd, when former President Yoon declared martial law, it was kind of a shock to the international community. Since then, the members of APEC, they've actually come to Korea for the senior officials meeting and the trade ministers meeting that comes before the main summit in November. And I don't think there were any major concerns raised at the time when when all the impeachment and the snap elections were happening. And I guess that kind of attests to a sort of a trust in the South Korean the government and the administration here. But it will be kind of the first time to see Lee Jae-myung as the chairperson of such a big international event. So it will be interesting to see how he will talk with the other leaders of other nations, such as the U.S. or Russia or China. And one thing I wanted to point out is that in last year's APEC summit, former President Yoon did mention that plans for a carbon-free energy summit would happen alongside the APEC summit, and this meeting would eventually talk about carbon neutrality. And we do know that Lee Jae-myung does have a more, I guess, concrete climate kind of agenda. He's mentioned that a little bit in his campaign leading up to his presidency, such as shutting down coal power plants and using more renewable energy resources. So, yeah, we don't know if the exact plans for this carbon-free energy summit will continue with Lee Jae-myung now being the new chairperson. But yeah, we'll see if similar plans will happen alongside the APEC summit.
Right. Colin, as I mentioned earlier, Gyeongju has been selected as the host city for this year's APEC. What are some of the prerequisites to be picked as the host venue of APEC, and what does this hosting mean for the city of Gyeongju itself, do you think?
Yes, as we say, the hosting duty nationally came around after 20 years back to Korea. I believe it's a 21-member organization, APEC, so it was about time. And when that was announced, South Korea then formed, of course, a committee to determine which city would host the summit. And I believe there were 3 major contenders. The short list was Incheon, and then, of course, Gyeongju, and as well Jeju province. So it wasn't necessarily only cities. But yes, Gyeongju won out, and the evaluation came down to, first, it's mostly infrastructural. Is the city equipped? Can it handle a conference of this size? You've got dignitaries flying in from many other countries. There's got to be an airport nearby. You've got to get them from the airport to the city. Can the city handle the crowd itself? Does the city have facilities for the meetings to put everybody up? It's not an easy matter. Gyeongju, surprisingly, we think of it as a small city, but it does have what it takes on that measure. There's also, of course, the political question: is this city in line in keeping with the goals of APEC for free trade and economic cooperation, that's probably a slightly easier hurdle to jump than the infrastructural one. But Gyeongju itself is, of course, a tourist destination. It's a domestic tourist destination of some popularity, one of the most popular, in fact, among Koreans. Not quite as well known in the rest of the world. So this could be a chance to raise awareness of Gyeongju as a place of tourism for other Asian countries, visitors from other Asian countries. And I'm sure the heads of state, the dignitaries coming in for APEC will be taken to the burial mounds, they'll be taken to the observatory, they'll see everything that Korean school kids all see on their own field trips. So it seems like a good, if somewhat unconventional choice for a meeting of this size. So we'll see how well they pull it off.
Right. And David, aside from the main APEC event, what other stories do you suppose look to make foreign headlines as we host this economic event?
I think definitely the presence of global leaders such as President Trump and President Xi Jinping will make the headlines later this year.
And this is, of course, if President Xi Jinping agrees to come, right?
Exactly, right. And also, we don't know if Vladimir Putin will also make a presence. So, yeah, those are some things. You know, this will be President Trump's first visit to South Korea since his re-election. I think it would be President Xi Jinping's first visit to South Korea in over a decade. And also the kind of interactions between these leaders as well. You know, Trump has boasted about his relationship with Vladimir Putin continuously, and you know, Trump and Xi Jinping's meeting, I think it's highly anticipated if it does happen. And I think one other thing you could look towards is how Lee Jae-myung, who is known to have a more, I guess, softer or diplomatic kind of approach to North Korea, how he's going to talk about the defense treaties with the other neighboring countries in Asia, in the Pacific Asia region, and how he's going to balance the diplomacy between the US and China. Because he has been on record for saying that while the US remains the strongest ally for South Korea, strengthening ties with China is also going to be important. So that's something that he's highlighted during his campaign. So yeah, those are some of the points I think we can look forward to.
This is an impromptu question, David, but do you suppose the prospects, the chances of the Chinese president visiting Korea for the APEC are quite high, or are they still?
From what I've read, they are expecting. And I guess if there aren't any, you know, such as, you know, any major conflicts or, you know, the U.S. and Chinese tensions are maybe softening a little bit these days, but we don't know what's going to happen in a couple of months' time. So I think it all depends on the situations in the international community.
Right, for sure. Colin, let's now move on to some other stories. According to British publication The Economist, a growing number of parents worldwide reportedly prefer girls over boys. What have you been observing here in South Korea?
Yes, this story in The Economist, the data they use has to do with, well, first off, just the raw numbers of male versus female children born in these societies. So, as I think we all know, in Asia, not just Asia, but Asia and Africa, and say certain countries in the Middle East, there's been a traditional preference for sons over daughters. So, historically, you saw a greater number of sons, a greater number of male children than female children for a variety of reasons. Now, this is changing, even in sort of China, the example that everybody points to as a place where there was a huge son preference, and then for many, the one-child policy in place that you could sort of buy your way out of, but most people couldn't. And so we're seeing now, according to this article, I believe in South Korea, the numbers are now for every 100 female children, there are 105 male children. I could have that wrong, but there used to be a wider gap. And so you can think of it this way, that it's not quite as close to equality as you'd think, because I think, as we all remember from biology class, women naturally are born at a higher frequency slightly than men. So all other things being equal, there should be a little more women than men. The number should be a little bit higher. But in any case, we're seeing, yes, the son preference going away. And some of these reasons are due to the form of the economy changing. In the olden days, you know, sons could be an asset. Daughters would cost you. Daughters you'd have to marry off, and you'd have to sort of shell out if you were going to do that. So if you had more and more daughters, you had more worries, like how am I going to do this? Especially if you have fewer sons and thus less economic power in your household. How are you going to get these daughters married off into another household? It was a real worry. Nowadays, there are fewer and fewer sort of marriage customs being adhered to. And so that's not as much of a worry. Parents are thinking, well, maybe it's actually easier to raise a daughter. In South Korea, if it's not a son, there's not the problem of sort of, should he go to the army? What should we do about that? And there's a sense that maybe daughters are easier to raise. I'm not sure. My own wife is pregnant with twins coming in August, and I think she would have been just as happy if it was 2 daughters. It is a son and a daughter, in fact. I think for her, as long as it wasn't 2 sons, it was fine. But I can sort of, to my mind, there are challenges for each. Yes, boys have their problems. Girls, if I really think about it, think about the whole of raising them, I think they could probably be just as difficult. But early on, I would guess daughters probably are easier. And so that might be what parents are thinking of. But yes, there's this Economist video it describes a sort of a TikTok video where a couple has a gender reveal party, as is common in the West, not so common here. But when it's found that the baby is a boy, the wife runs off crying, oh, I can't take it. That seems a bit extreme. But then I think whenever there's a trend, people exaggerate their adherence to that trend as well. You know,
right.
We're humans and we have social media. What can you do?
Right, we do. But regardless of gender, though,
Yes.
health is the most important thing, of
That's
course,
what I
though,
say.
right? Meanwhile, David, in perhaps the latest tangible proof of the power, if you will, of soft diplomacy, we're seeing BTS fans supporting Korean international adoptees. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah. What kind of spearheaded this movement was members of BTS, one by one, discharging from their military enlistments. And I did actually see the crowd during the dischargement of the day that member Jimin and V, they both discharged on the same day. And I just saw like thousands of fans from all over the world kind of congregating near Hybe's, their music label, Hybe's building in Yongsan. And I think it's become kind of a festival, kind of a celebration of its own. I guess in memory of that celebration, they are, focusing on these social issues, right? And foreign fans of K-pop groups do have a track record, quite a strong track record of being involved in these social initiatives, such as BTS's fan club ARMY, donating during the when the Black Lives Movement was happening in the US, and more recently them being a part of the Free Palestine movement. And I think a big part of the reason that they are so interested in these social initiatives is because a lot of the fan base, they are made up from the young population, or so to say, Generation Z. So they do have strong opinions about these progressive ideals that they hold on to, and they're also from very diverse social backgrounds. So those are kind of the factors that make them interested in these social issues. And for this typical one in South Korea, where they're talking about the international adoptee programs that have started, since the Korean War ended, in the 1950s. The reason is that South Korea has been the biggest exporter of adopted babies since the 1950s. More than 140,000 children have been adopted since 1955, it says. And actually recently, this last March, in March this year, a landmark case, or investigation, I should say, found that the government had a lack of oversight over these private agencies like Holt, who enacted on these mass exportations of adopted babies overseas. And they found that sometimes there were cases of fraud and falsified documents and coercion. So this is, and I actually talked with one of these adoptees earlier this year, and she told me that she's been visiting South Korea for over a decade, trying to find her birth parents, and every time she would seek help from the agency that was in charge of her adoption process, they didn't have any clear answers, they didn't have any clear documents to kind of support to document like how the process went and where she came from. So there are thousands of cases like hers, and yeah, this is kind of a continuing issue in South Korea, and one of the I should say more issues that have been highlighted in the international press.
All right, and BTS fans are trying to raise a greater awareness about these issues.
Exactly.
Right, and I understand Sugar is poised to complete his service tomorrow on Saturday.
Yes, very soon.
Right. Colin, we're going to end on a rather solemn note today. A recent article by the South China Morning Post claims or highlights efforts by the city officials here in Seoul to fight loneliness. Could you tell us a bit more about this?
Yes, this loneliness, the loneliness, not quite epidemic, but the problem of loneliness is pronounced, you could say, in Seoul. 35% of households in this city are single individual households. You might say they're not families, not couples, they're households of one. And this is something you see more and more in a wealthy urbanized area. So in a way, this is a disease of wealth, kind of like the birth rate problems. You get the low birth rate when income goes up. People don't have to live together when a country is less poor, and so they don't. You do get a lot of people who are happy living by themselves, but then people who are not so happy living by themselves in the long run. So it's not necessarily entirely solemn, though. There is one effort that these articles have focused on that's happening in Seoul recently. They're called the 마음 편의점. And they're not actually 편의점 or convenience stores. They're not stores. They're places you can go. There are 4 locations, I believe, in Seoul right now, and eat for free. You can eat ramyeon, or the instant noodles that are so popular in convenience stores. And not only that, you can also get mental health counseling if you do suffer loneliness or other related problems, other related conditions, other depression it might be, any of those suite of how to put it, mental struggles, you can go there and get some advice. You might be connected with other services. And it is the 마음 편의점. 마음 is an intriguing word for many foreigners because it means mind, but also means heart. It's somewhere in the middle there. It's like how when people say what they think, they point to their chest in Korea. It's a notable cultural difference, but I think other countries might do well to see how these work, how it goes. Is this something that can work in Korean society, only Korean society, maybe other societies as well? Is it just good to have a place people can go to get some advice and some free ramyeon? Maybe it is. But these are new, and we'll see how well they integrate into society as time goes on.
Right, to ease or to fight loneliness here in the capital city then.
Indeed.
All right, Colin, I'm afraid that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for your insights. And
Thank
David,
you.
thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Right, well, that is all the time we have today. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend.